Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about climate change. What I'd like you to do is take a look at this. This is NASA imagery showing the entire planet and what's happened in recent decades here. Here's America in 2012, not only the warmest year in record here, but also the second most extreme. It featured tornadoes, wildfires, massive drought, and of course, Superstorm Sandy. I want to bring a panel in on this. O'Brien Murray, Republican strategist, Dominic Carter, political journalist, author, and Andrew Whitman, senior political correspondent. We'll talk about some dollars and cents, even regionally here with what Mayor Bloomberg did in a minute. But I spoke to a climatologist a minute ago. Intentionally, I wanted to talk to three guys like me, regular people here. This is not our life's work. But I think this is going to be the biggest issue, politically, practically, from a public policy standpoint, that we're going to have to address as a country. If not in the next 10 years, certainly in the 10 years after that. And every year we put this thing off, it's going to keep getting worse and worse, and our options more limited and limited. Do you think everybody gets it, that this thing is not going to take care of itself? And somebody's going to have to do something, whether it's from planning, whether it be from a prevention, whether it be from a remedy standpoint. Does everybody get it that this thing doesn't take care of itself?
Well, when you say, does everybody get it, I think there's a lot of disagreement on what they get.
Tell me you're not one of these climate change deniers.
I'm not denying anything. What I'm saying is that there's no agreement on what has to be done going forward and how, what to sacrifice to do it.
Right. I think you're right. But
should we go sit on the beach every day and not have an economy? Can we at least
agree on this? Maybe there's not consensus about what to do about it, but do we agree that we trust the 90-some-odd percentile of the scientific community, globally and nationally, that agrees that the world is heating up at more of an accelerated rate than they projected? The seas are rising here, polar ice caps are melting, and the consequences to not just the ecosystems, the geography of this place, it is real, and the storms are going to keep getting worse and worse every year. We're not debating that part, right?
The fact is, over the billions of years we've been around too, there's always been warming. No, there always is. And the challenge is when the far left comes out with a movie like Al Gore did that was full of errors. There was more than 30 errors that were in that movie. That discredits the argument what's got to be done going forward. And
I didn't ask what's got to be done. I asked at least if you agree to the reality of what's going on now.
There are plenty of people who don't think that man has contributed to the rise in temperatures that we've seen. There are a lot of people who are with their hands on the levers of power in business and government who seem to take that position. And as O'Brien mentioned, that limits what the options are for going forward.
But do we agree? Just do it from a numerical standpoint. So we don't present this as a debate that, well, 50% of the scientific community think this and 50% of the scientific community think that.
It's about 98 to 2.
Yeah, it's about 98 to 2 that they say it's not only bad, it's really bad. And Dominic, I put it in the context, I'm going to do it all night long, of, wait a minute. It's one thing if I'm shooting pool myself, but I got kids. And what are we leaving behind for the kids? And again, everybody's going to make their own decisions. There's no such thing as a perfect world. I get all that. But they're going to have less options than we did when we were growing up. And even if we do something about it, and we have to, okay. But to pretend that this is not a problem getting worse by, and it's getting like each year the problem doubles down. And we talked about it with a guest. When you have all the Barrier Islands start to disappear, when you have the beach erosions go away, the next storm you even have less defenses than the one before it, and each storm keeps getting bigger and bigger. I mean, you don't have to be a scientist or climatologist to see what's going on.
Well, you asked the layman's point of view, the regular person's point of view. I think right now, across the country, most Americans think that this issue is cute in terms of, oh, it's great, the weather's getting hotter, we're living like we're in Florida, that's a great thing. I think that's a sentiment by most. But the fact of the matter is, this is not a vacation, it's not a joke, it's life-threatening. People have lost their lives. We just heard from the experts say things are gonna get a lot worse before they get a lot better. This is serious. We have got to deal with this. That's why kudos to Bloomberg for him trying to do what he's doing. I know you're going to talk about that later. This is a very serious issue that's impacting. It's not far left or far right. This is something that's going to impact every citizen of the world.
Well, to that end, what did we hear yesterday from Mayor Bloomberg? Within 50 years, water levels could rise 2 feet. And the flood zones that all of a sudden in Manhattan, in lower New York, in the 5 boroughs, the amount of places that would be underwater right now. Now, the problem is, okay, you're not going to be able to, say somebody come up with a doohickey to plug the ozone here or freeze more water in the ice caps like in a comic book. So you basically just got to deal with remedies. And the remedies are pretty expensive, right?
They are. The mayor proposing $20 billion package of remedies just the other day. Among those remedies, a seawall or several seawalls that the mayor has planned in mind. And here's an idea of what that might look like when put into reality.
Experts now wonder if the massive storm surge that flooded lower Manhattan and washed away parts of the Jersey Shore could have been solved by sea barriers. Some scientists say Staten Island originally started as a natural barrier island, but the construction of roads, parking lots, and homes created an urban landscape, taking away this natural shield. Now 2 European firms are proposing massive shields like these walls at the head of New York Harbor. Flood protections that were once considered unnecessary, now being reconsidered after Sandy's 14-foot surge.
Anyone who says there's not a dramatic change in weather patterns, I think is denying reality.
Oceanography professor Malcolm Bowman says a redesign is critical.
If we had implemented these barriers by now, there would have been no damage to New York City from the ocean.
The barriers are high-tech. In one design, a wall lays flat at the bottom of the harbor, pivoting up when needed to block a storm surge. And they've proven effective in other major coastal regions like London and the Netherlands, operating 24 hours a day. But one proposal for New York's harbor runs upward of $6 billion, and skeptics say the massive barriers may not work on long stretches of coastline like the Jersey Shore.
When you have an enormous harbor like we do in Long Island Sound, even if you spent a fortune, it's not clear to me that you would get much value for it.
But with damage estimates for the storm now reaching into the billions, many are saying it's now time to consider new ideas.
Okay. Question is, where do we get the money? Now, you were talking about yesterday, Dominic, that to Bloomberg at least, he at least had a rainy day fund. But as big a rainy day fund, and most places don't have what the city does, it's not even half of what they need here. And we have Washington that says government's too big already as it is. So the idea that we're going to have a national infrastructure program like we've had at different times in this country for different reasons, albeit, that seems to be slight. I don't know. I just don't see another way around, Andrew. The feds having to take point on this.
There's going to have to be action in Washington, both in terms of direct construction of infrastructure. I also think an option may be putting some of the onus on business, especially businesses that deal with infrastructure or that may be involved or impacted by these climate change, having businesses step up. And for example, one of the mayor's solutions the other day was talking about power companies and other utilities not only going to have to deal with protecting their equipment and their lines, but also storm mitigation and ways they're going to have to contribute to the process of stormproofing them and stormproofing the city as they do the construction around it. There aren't a lot of good options here. And it's a huge price tag now, and it's an untenable price tag down the road if we wait.
And also you get to the point, there will be unlivable areas where along shoreline communities where we all would have killed to have some of the beachfront property 10, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, I'll tell you me, when I was looking at a home, I always wanted to get to a point where I could buy a house on the water. I said, don't even show me anything 5, 10 miles from the water here because I'm not dealing with flooding. You know, all the friends of mine had to live through this. It changes the way we live.
East Coast, West Coast, we've been seeing this for years. That's the same
Not to this degree.
Well, you and I were talking on the break about some of the hurricanes that have come up the East Coast before. I went to school in Rhode Island. I remember seeing all the pictures up there from the 1920s of the major hurricanes and so forth. Yes, there are things that need to be done over the next 50 years. A lot of change is going to take place.
But who's going to pay for it?
That's the big question. Who to pay for it, whether it's the feds, whether it's the city. There's also a question now of pay me now or pay me later. When you talk about FEMA and what they had to do and step forward for Hurricane Sandy, that was after damage occurred. How much is the government going to put in to prevent things in the future?
If I if I said there was a definitive thing with 100% unity of a scientific community and all the agencies that we employ, and they said, this is what it's going to look like, everybody, in 2050 in America. You got New Orleans underwater. You got Lower Manhattan underwater. I mean, you got a lot of the eastern seaboard, Florida, and then you've got droughts over here. This is what we have to do. We got to reroute our water supply here. We're going to have protected areas where they can't go near any of the seabeds or whatever. It's going to cost us X $100 billion. If I told you if we don't do this now, we'll lose that part of America, do you think even then there'd be a political will in Washington to bite the bullet and do it?
I don't see that happening right now.
Wow.
I think there's no money. Right now you're talking about people that can't put food on their table now. And you're now talking about trying to prevent what's going to happen 50 years from now. That's the political reality. It's not a question of personal belief. It's reality.
How many hundreds of $billions have we spent, if not
but
trillions,
Richard,
on wars?
Richard,
all right?
but look at
those
that.
are choices.
But look at that disaster. And it's not weather related. What happened in Texas at that? They've stopped the FEMA dollars. They're outraged. They're in an outrage in Texas. There's no more FEMA money for them. And the president pledged to do all that he could. So if there's no money for FEMA to deal with something right now, imagine the environment for down the road.
A simple thing to
I
look
agree
at.
with
I
you.
know you're right. I know you're right, though.
Richard,
and that's
look
the
at
part
the-
that scares the...
Look
Right.
at the fight
Pay
over
me now, pay
Homeland
me
Security
later.
dollars right now. Right now, when there's a question of Homeland Security dollars and where to spend them, and when Pete King was chairman of that committee, and what he did to defend New York and make sure New York, its #1 target, got money, there was also fights for it in places in the Midwest, small towns, where they need to have money for radios for the firefighters and all first responders to be able to speak to each other. The question was, where does that money go, when, and how? When you start talking about preventing New York from a major catastrophe versus putting food on the table now or first responders, where do you put that money? Where is that decision?
The only chance is to convince people that this is a homeland security issue. It's the ultimate homeland security issue. Right now, people don't view it that way.
And
It's
I think
interesting.
also, this is a longer conversation, we'll get a break, but the idea of actually having Americans, like we saw in prior generations, see something of a common fight that we all have to sacrifice and we all have to do something for it. You're all right. Everything you say, yeah, I think you're right. National security, homeland security issue. You're right here that, you know, on the priority basis, and you're right here that people are going to say, hey, I'm rubbing nickels together already. But you can see the train coming down the tracks now. That's the most frustrating part for me. And in 30 years from now, they'll turn around and say to me, hey, old man, why didn't you guys do anything? What did your generation do? And look at what we're dealing with now. And they'll be 100% right.
The property owners have an opportunity to do certain things too. My dad built a generator for his house out in Asheville, North Carolina, after so many trees were coming down in the woods. At the same time, if you look down
We're
at
not talking about generators, though.
No,
right?
but I'm talking like Battery Park. When at Battery Park City, which is all a landfill, all built into the Hudson and so forth, a fantastic development down there done years ago. One of the buildings down there had no outage. It had its power because when it was built for the potential of this water, opposed to other buildings where they put stuff in the basement.
All treating the symptoms, none treating the disease.
All right. Or even the long-term remedy. All right, when we come back, Andrew sat down, I'm sure with a long-lost relative somewhere along the line, Christy Todd Whitman, former Republican governor of New Jersey, talking about a lot of interesting things, both the politics in Jersey, including the Senate race, and why she feels left out of her own party. And also talks about some of those environmental issues. Don't forget, she used to be the EPA chair. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back.